All right, so I'm about to post my Saved by the Bell review for episodes 11 through 15. I have to put a disclaimer that on one of the videos basically say there was no building scene. There actually was a building scene in there, and there was a famous line in there that said, "Who you calling cantaloupe, you melon head?" So there was a scene in there. And I think that I messed up some of the episodes, or the podcast messed up on some of the episodes. I don't know. Ignore the episode numbers. They are all kind of jumbled up. Like on Peacock and Prime, they say that there are certain episodes like 14, 15, 16, like King of the Hill is 17, but then for some reason the podcast is actually 15. So I don't know. I'm confused. You're confused. We're all confused. So I just wanted to say that before you start watching these clips. That's all. Thank you.
You guys know who Zack Morris is?
No. Since Target and Walmart are pushing 80s fashions down your throats, I think it's time for you guys to learn about this iconic cast from Saved by the Bell. Zack Morris, the most popular boy in school, also known as the blonde Tom Cruise, his words not mine, and the most selfish and manipulative person you'll ever meet. Wonder why millennials are jaded? It's because of Zack. But Zack Morris is dope, as my shirt says. Jesse Spano basically paved the way for modern day feminism. AC Slater, the school jock, pretty much good at everything, but also a misogynistic pig. He was proud of it too. Oink oink baby. Want to thank somebody for muscle tees? Thank him. Want to thank somebody for those baggy jean pants that are coming back? Thank him. Kelly Popowski is America's sweetheart, also the most undecisive person ever. But matching tie-dye outfits, does that seem familiar to you guys? Screech is known for breaking barriers, the nerd that hung out with the cool kids, beloved and determined, but also a stalker. Lisa Turtle, basically the most fashionable icon of that time era. Also, let's talk about breaking glass ceilings. Definitely her. When is episode 11 called The Friendship Business. In this episode, the class is given $100 to start their own business. Zack and the team develop these friendship bracelets. But of course, Zack lets his selfishness get in the way and then causes the team to fight and split up into a separate business. Zack's hair rating in this episode is definitely a 7. It's a little bit more brown right here, but I really like it in this episode. I also like this outfit that they put him in. A few conclusions that I thought about with Zack in this episode. I think Zack suffers from only child syndrome, where a lot of his antics comes from him being selfish because he doesn't have siblings or anything like that. Also, I remember in many episodes, he doesn't have a good relationship with his dad where he wants his dad's attention. So sometimes I think his antics are to get people's attention because he probably doesn't get a lot of it at home. Also, the theme of this episode is friendship forever, which Zack promotes. But at the same time, he consistently screws over his friends all the time. Saved by the Bell, The Friendship Business, Part 2. I had so many more thoughts about this episode than I thought, so I had to make a part 2. Okay, the fact that Belding was so happy that Zack gave him a buddy band broke my heart. Because I started to realize that Belding kind of skates between this world of being cool and uncool at the same time. And perhaps he became a high school principal to make up for the fact that he wasn't as cool in high school. And although Zack is a thorn in his side, he recognizes that Zack is a very popular kid and was so happy to get a buddy band from him. But in turn, all Zack did was just use him to serve his own agenda. Also, one of my favorite things is how they break up the show with singing and dancing. But also how it's weird where they can be really great at one thing in one episode and then suck at it in another episode. There literally was no mention at the end that Zack sabotaged their business. He literally never suffers the consequences of any of his. The Bell, episode 12, called The Mamas and the Papas. In this episode, there's a school assignment where they pair the kids up and they pretend to be married and do marriage assignments. Zack's hair rating in this episode is probably about a 4. It's doing some sort of crazy wispy thing right here. This episode I feel like is one of the more concerning episodes out of all the episodes that aired. Just for a few different factors, right? Because now in today's age, we would never have some sort of assignment like this where basically we're teaching the kids certain gender roles. But also the cringe factor of Zack Morris in this episode, was a lot. Almost every moment he got, he tried to push his affection onto Kelly. And the fact that she smiles every single time in all those attempts was so cringeworthy as well. Among other things, definitely not my favorite episode to watch. Zack to the Future, episode 12, The Mamas and the Papas. I was really curious to finish this one because I really wanted to know what Mark Paul Gosselaar thought about Zack's creep factor in this particular episode. Mark's Paul reaction was basically Zack is trying so hard to get into Kelly's pants, but the funny thing is that him at that time being 14 or 15, he had none of those life experiences. So it's funny that they write these scripts for him making him say these certain things when he really didn't know how or what he was doing. They also brought up a really interesting point about Screech. Sometimes we feel like Screech or Dustin Diamond is like kind of like the victim in some of the funnier roles. But really Screech is the mastermind because he always plays kind of in the middle and plays off both characters, Zack and Slater. Like he does whatever whoever wants for his benefit. They also mentioned that Jesse and Slater never kissed throughout the series, and I think that's true. Saved by the Bell episode 14 called The Election. In this episode, Zack finds out that the student body president will win a trip to Washington, D.C., so he decides to run against Jesse for that position. Zack's hero rating in this episode is like a 6.5. It's very coiffed and clean, but I think coming from last episode, I kind of miss it being a little bit messy. It's too short for me, I think. The funny thing about this episode is that Zack is concentrated on his 1 week off from school. But then if he becomes student body president, he would have to have way more after school activities. Like, why put that responsibility on himself? I don't understand. One of the highlights of this episode is belting in the locker room wearing this. I can't imagine that they had to convince him to wear this. And why is he always in the kids' locker room working out? It's just odd. The other thing you realize in this episode is how uncool Jesse is. One of the things I find super interesting about Saved by the Bell is the dynamic of how all the cool kids hang out with non-cool kids like Screech. Future episode 14 called The Election. They had a guest star on there named Reed. He's a political analyst, and he met Mark Paul Gosselaar on a plane. Imagine sitting right next to Mark Paul Gosselaar on a plane. I don't think I would be able to contain myself. Or maybe I would. I'm not a very extroverted person in real life, so I probably would just sit there and not say anything. A lot of the times they spend the podcast debunking what Saved by the Bell is, about how ridiculous some of the antics are. But in this podcast, they talk about how similar the election in Saved by the Bell is to real life elections, which I was very interested by. Also, Mark Paul revealed something that made me shook. In the episode, they do a video and they show basically real life baby pictures of him. This is his mom. This blonde hair, blue-eyed man is half Asian. And you guys thought I was only attracted to white guys. Zack to the Future, episode 14, The Zack Tapes. One of the more funny things about this particular podcast is how Mark Paul Gosselaar is actually truly disgusted of how Kelly reacts to him and wants to go to the dance with Slater. He actually kind of confirms all the things that I've been saying all along. I really think that Zack is actually not Kelly's type. She proves that in so many episodes, and this one definitely she shows it in her face. She actually is quite appalled in one of the beginning episodes where he takes off Slater's heart. Mark Paul also mentions that Dustin Diamond is a very good physical comedy actor. It just makes me sad because I feel like he could have went so much further in his career. If you watch any of the Saved by the Bell, Screech is such a dynamic character, and Dustin Diamond does so great in that role. They talk about the nerds and how the nerds are such a staple in the Saved by the Bell culture. He also confirmed something I thought really weirdly about Slater's hair. Slater used to perm his hair. That's why he had that curly hair, and now he doesn't have it anymore. Saved by the Bell episode 15 called The Zack Tapes. In this episode, Zack puts hidden messages in music so that way Kelly can ask him to the school dance. This teacher right here has been in 2 episodes so far. In the last episode, she was like a sexual ed teacher, and now she's a marketing teacher. Weird. Zack's hair rating is, I think, a 6 in this one. It's kind of growing on me, this messy hair. This is also the second episode that the girls get together and teach Zack a lesson and turn the tables around on him, which doesn't happen very often with his schemes. Screech dresses up as Barbara Bush to get in the girls' locker room. And you would think that once Jesse finds out that he dresses up to get into the girls' locker room, which is a private area where girls change, that they would have a lot more problems with that part of it. Because you know that Screech does it more than once in the series. Look at Slater's disgusted face. Sometimes in these episodes, you kind of see how insecure Zack actually is because he's constantly always trying to trick people into liking him more. Which actually proves to me that we all have a Zack Morris inside of us.